Welcome to Camp Confidential, Beyond the Bars. I'm Katrina McLarin, and with my co-host Cheryl Womack, author, entrepreneur and philanthropist, we tell it like it is. In Season 1, we take you inside the walls of a women's federal prison camp. From pre-sentencing to navigating daily life behind bars, we offer practical advice, survival strategies and insights that no one tells you before you go in. No sugarcoating, no cliches. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only. Be sure to do your own research and consult a professional. Today's episode, Whatever Can Go Wrong Will Go Wrong, is based off the book How to Go to Camp, Surviving in a Women's Federal Prison by Cheryl Womack, available now on Amazon. Becoming a convicted felon brings significant and often unexpected changes to nearly every aspect of your life. Cheryl, when you accepted the plea deal, did you have any idea the extent of the ramifications that being a convicted felon would bring?
Not at all. I mean, I weighed heavily. I'm a big voter. I really believe in the right to vote. And I weighed heavily on what that was going to do to my right to vote. And I was aware of that. I worried about what complications there could be other than that. But the reality of being marked for life had not remotely set in. Not remotely.
So did you know that at the time or not really?
Oh, not real. I just think you can't begin to know. I mean, you thought you sort of, because you've been going through this process for 4 years legally, with with attorneys, then you're telling yourself, I sort of understand how people are going to react. You really don't. It changes once you've made a plea deal and admitted guilt. Even if your guilt is nobody reads what it is because they get the press release from the prosecuting attorney's office that accuses you of everything under the sun that you didn't plead to. So they all get this dramatic story about what's going on in that you're saying you did wrong. And none of those things have anything to do with your plea deal. So you don't even though you know they did press releases along the way through some of the pre-hearings and things, you just don't realize how the Kansas City Star is going to take their press release and use their press release instead of looking for one from both of you or sitting in the courtroom where he did and try to put a legitimate spin on it. Though, what legitimate spin could he put on it? Because they stood up and did all the talking. I really just sat there.
So during this whole process, you don't feel like you were really able to adequately put your viewpoint forward?
Not at all. I mean, not at all. I was pleading guilty to impeding the government. And my attorney at the time had assured me she'd find a way to make it where it just didn't seem so harmful. But it doesn't matter what it is. First, you've got a press release coming out from the prosecuting attorney where they've charged me with like 19 counts when they started with, and the one they ended up with was impeding the government. But they read all of them and put them all in there. So you're stuck with that. And then second, now you've said you're a felon and you're agreeing that you've done something wrong. And of course, everybody thinks, oh, it's the FBI. If they're involved, it must be serious and it must be right. The FBI is so good. Well, we've all learned, certainly recently, that the FBI is not quite as upstanding as we all hoped they would be.
What was the first incident that you can recall when you thought, my accepting this plea deal has had a negative impact upon my life, whether it be through someone's reaction in a business world or personal?
I probably didn't realize the implications of it until I got into prison. And the things that I had in place began to get canceled that I thought I'd had taken care of, like the bank loan, like the insurance, things like that we've talked about. And I thought I'd gone to a lot of trouble during that 30 days and prior to have everything be put in place. And suddenly those things were blowing up or increasing to a budget that I'd not planned for. And, I'm trying to sit there and figure out how to deal with them after I'm out of society.
So tell me, another thing that comes up as far as once that conviction's gone through and it's recorded against you is that you now have lifelong travel limitations. I know you had limitations during the process. Do you want to talk us a little bit through that?
Well, you don't travel during the process. If you want to go out of a certain area, which is a very limited area, you have to send an email to them, get permission, even to go to Lawrence, Kansas and go to KU basketball games, which is something I did routinely. I wrote to them and they said I didn't have to ask them every time after I asked them. But just to go to Lawrence, Kansas and attend a KU basketball game, I had to make them aware of it, make them aware of the dates and get permission in advance to go, or I'd be out of territory. And that puts me in default of what my agreement is, which could cause me to have to go surrender into jail immediately and not be out waiting.
And I know too that you had to do some international travel because you needed to go back to the Caymans for that hearing that the judge down there called. So what was that? Was that an easy process for you to do, or was that difficult? How did that go about?
That one wasn't so hard because that's before I pled guilty. That's when the judge and came and the magistrate and came and said, I want you to come down here. I think people are talking about you and you're the only one who's not weighing in on it, and had me come. So I had to go back to them and get my passport because they took my passport immediately. Of course, what's crazy is in the very end, they lost my passport and I never got my original one back. But they did find
Really?
it. They totally lost it. 10 years worth of great stamps and places that I'd been all over the world. I was sort of sad. But I mean, it just, those were great memories and, great, just nice things to have. But so I had to get the passport when I just sent a copy of the judge's letter, and the judge said, "Sure, you can go because you've got another judge asking you to attend." And they let me go for 7 days, but I had to immediately surrender my passport as soon as I got back, which I did. I was free to move all around Cayman Island while I was there. There were no restrictions on that. But even if you want to, when you're out on parole and everything, even if you want to go to the store during your time that you're on paper, you have to have it scheduled on a calendar to say, I'm on paper and I'm going to go to the store and here's when I'm going. And at any time they can call or drop by and check your whereabouts. And again, you can be in trouble for not following those things. It's very strict.
So even though you're out of prison now and it's been some time, how does the conviction actually impact upon your travel ability now?
Well, I think the biggest thing is if I'm going to travel globally, I have to check the country. For example, Canada does not allow felons in. And I went to Canada for work quite a bit in the past. And so I'm glad I've been there and I've seen how beautiful it is because I won't get to go back. I don't know that if I go just as a 30-day or 2-week tourist, if I can't get in under reciprocity for most European places. But Australia is another country that when you file to get your permit to go over there, I think I have to get permission because I'm a felon. So there's a number of countries that you have to get permission because you're a felon. Again, you've paid your time, you've done everything you're supposed to do. It should be off the books. I struggle with Australia since it's a country that was founded by prisoners. I struggle with that, but that they're so strict about letting prisoners in, but you're not a prisoner when you go in. I mean, you're a felon who's done their time and you're off your paper and, it doesn't matter.
I'm just going to point out that I'm actually from New Zealand and we were founded by free people. I'm just going to slot that in for my Australian listeners that are listening. As an entrepreneurial businesswoman, when you came out of prison, did you find that having this conviction impacted in any way upon your business going forward and trying to set up even new businesses? What were the roadblocks that you encountered there?
I called upon and pulled upon a number of people that knew me well to try to go down new roads or even pick up old roads and do things. And I was fortunate to go to a bank that gave me a good line of credit. But they needed to see results and they needed to see the loan paid off. And so they needed, the very first thing I had to do when I got out, even while I was on paper, was I knew Michelle, the woman who'd set up everything for banking, but I hadn't met the 3 founders or 4 founders of the business. So 3 out of 4 of them wanted to come meet me for lunch and just sit down and say, gosh, we've got a big loan with this woman. We probably ought to meet her and see what kind of woman she is. And of course, I sat them down and assured them I will never default on my loan. They'll never have to worry about that, and how appreciative I was that they picked the loan up under such unique circumstances. And I did pay the loan off in full. And I got a phone call from the CEO of the bank when I did that and said, I always knew you would. And we felt really good about backing you. But, if you had ran into complications and problems and things would have taken a little bit longer to get things paid down or show you're making some efforts on payments, that could be a different story too, because you're a felon.
Now, the title for this episode, Whatever Can Go Wrong Will Go Wrong, I think it alludes to let's bring up something to do with the IRS, because it's a great segue into something that should have been sorted out at the very beginning of this whole process and a negotiation had been reached. But then, of course, when this all popped up with the FBI, that got put on the back burner. And as a result, that is still something that is out in the wind to this day that you're still having to deal with as far as the ramifications and fallout of this whole process. Will you explain what happened and what that was all about?
Sure. So I sold my business in 2002. It had been a C corporation, which means if it had losses, it just lost the losses. You couldn't claim any losses to carry forward to help with tax breaks or anything. It's a C corporation. So I made a lot of profit with my previous businesses, a lot of profit, and I paid a lot of taxes. And not just business taxes, but all the taxes you pay for employees and everybody else, including on myself. So then I started getting audited after the sale, and I'd become an LLC. And as I became an LLC, they came and I had bought 2 jets, and I wanted to start a charter business out of Kansas City. And it took a while to get that going, but I did get that going, and I was actually profitably, let's say, instead of profitably breaking even with a little bit of profit, having a charter, but at the same time having the opportunity for business to use the plane when I wanted to. I traveled a lot, so it was great to have that. So long story short, the losses carried forward by without getting too complicated, they came up with tax breaks that said if you buy something that's over a certain weight and over $100,000, you get 50% of it off the first year. Well, you buy a jet and you get half of it off. That's a good tax break. And so I had this huge tax credit that went against the sale of my business. Well, I bought two jets in about an 8-month period of time. So I had two jets to deduct off. And what I've learned that's hard for me is that even bankers don't understand losses carried forward. You'll give them your financials and you show a big amount of losses you have because if you don't use all your losses in 1 year, let's say I've got, $10,000 sitting in losses and I only have 5,000 to claim, well, they'll take the 5,000 and they'll carry forward the other 5,000 because I basically prepaid taxes by the losses that I have. By investing in other businesses, by investing in green energy, by investing in new businesses, by investing in employee programs, all those different things qualified you. And I participated in a number of those things for tax credits as well as the opportunities for the business. So I did all those. I even had the IRS show up at my hangar and look at my jets, meet my mechanic, go through everything. But now remember, I had Brandy in the background. So while she's showing them initially at first, somewhere around 2005, 2006, she's not cooperating with them. She's not keeping good ledgers on my numbers. I don't have good support. It's a cluster. So now when we have to give them information, suddenly she's telling me, well, they're losing it. Well, I don't know if they lost what she sent them or she never sent it to them. I just don't know because I wasn't on that side paying enough attention to know. And I'd counted on her and I counted on Al Davison, who was a tax attorney, to get these things handled.
And she was busy stealing from you at that time. Let's point that out. That's in the time frame that she's actually starting to embezzle hundreds of thousands of dollars out of your company.
Yes, that started in 2003.
Yeah.
So we're starting out with
We're
this
in the height of it. We're in the height of her
in the middle of
embezzlement.
it. And, of course, stupid me. I'm just not having the lights go off and tell me I need to pay attention to these things. I did have a lot going on, but it was horrible. So they're looking at the charter, they're looking at the businesses. They're all businesses, and I've got Brandy going. She's got 30 businesses. Nobody has 30 businesses. I did. I
You
invested.
did. You did.
You did. You were there. I mean, all I did was run from thing to thing to thing. And some of them were just not. Some of them were a little bit passive. Some were pretty aggressive. Some were real estate. It was a very busy time, and so I don't keep all the support for all of that. And suddenly I'm trying to go back and find things to prove what I've got, even the logs to show for my trips and everything else. And Brandy didn't keep those either. She just didn't keep good information, which made it very difficult. But again, the tax credits occurred not because of my use of the plane, but because of the amount of the 50% deduction. And by the second plane, well, now you get 100% of the plane taken off. I did not. I got 50%, and the rest of it's carried over 26 years or whatever it is. So I had a very complicated tax return. So the IRS comes in and we're negotiating, and I want to say 2005, and I am using a tax attorney out of California. And they literally get on with the IRS and we get the thing settled. They're taking away all my losses carry forward, so I won't have those anymore, and about $80,000 cash. And we have that deal settled. And I don't know when, but the FBI went in and froze that deal. They froze it so it didn't happen. And basically, my attorney came back and said, the IRS has stopped the deal. You're not going to get this deal made right now. Things really began to pick up for the legal side of things in 2008. The IRS approached me again to settle the deal. And I said, the deal I have was signed by the IRS, signed by me. All we had to do is have the attorneys look at it and process it. So I said, pick that up and go with that again, because it's been a long time. They came back and they said they got called again by the FBI and told to freeze the deal. They could not make the deal. And I think I'd even said to the FBI, I think I'm settling my IRS thing. Well, later what I learned is that by having an old IRS case that had been open so long, when they're accusing me of tax evasion, are trying to show there's a pattern of behavior. Now, I had that thing settled in 2005 for audits that started in 2003, but they wouldn't let me settle them. So now when we're suddenly in 2013 getting indicted, I still don't have them settled because they won't let me settle them. So they're sitting there. Then when they did settle with me for criminal, they settled with me for everything they wanted to call criminal, and they left open the civil ones that I'd had settled before that now, almost 20 years later, are still pending to be settled with the government. So I'm still paying attorneys to try to settle that.
That's absolutely crazy.
It's just another one of those things that hangs over your head and takes money. Just even the latest attorney I've used, since I've been out and hired him, I've spent $500,000 on the guy to get it settled, and I know nothing. I just don't know anything about what's going on. And again, I want to go to court now. I don't want to do anything else but go to court because I had legitimate charter businesses. I had legitimate businesses that I invested in. I had businesses that went under that I took serious losses in. And I want to go to court. And I have the pilots who've come forward and said, I'll come testify that I was your pilot. And it was a legitimate charter for other people. So I've now found and identified other people that'll come to court for me and help testify to those things. But at the time when we were scrambling on everything, I've got to tell you, I think I didn't even have my wits about me enough to, or have the nerve because you're so beaten down to get on the phone and call these people and say, what can we do? So it's just another one of those things that's hung over my head that should have been cleared up in 2005. And here we are in 2025, and it's not.
It's quite scary to think that the FBI can have that control over the IRS because it suits them to paint a certain narrative of and wanting to create that impression that there's that pattern of behaviour. Once again, I think it all goes back to that point that the only witness they had was the embezzler.
Yeah, the embezzler. Not that they didn't try. They interviewed 150 people. And the only one they could come up with to testify against me was Brandy and the government who made the case against me.
I want to add a note there too, because it's important, and this is in the court transcripts. She is on record for having falsified documents.
Yes.
So this is not something that we're just making up or something that could be, we've got a slanted view. Go read the documents. It's all there in black and white in the court transcripts as well.
Well, more than that, in the preliminary hearing that we had before we were going to go to a final hearing where we brought witnesses in, you'll recall I've told you that the FBI agent got found to be a liar by the magistrate judge. And they just had a conniption fit when that happened and said, no, you've got to take this away. And the head judge wrote to her and said, on what basis are you deciding that this guy's a liar? I'm sorry, 30 or 40 years of sitting on the bench and being a judge and listening to testimony and seeing what's going on. He lied because what he did is early on, he came and saw me for like 10 minutes and then wrote a dissertation of what would have taken hours to sit in a meeting with me. What he did is he picked up when they pulled me in for Al Davison's case forever ago and asked questions about Al's, they asked questions about mine. And so he tried to get all that testimony about mine in from that, which didn't have anything to do with it, and acted like that's what I told him. Well, we didn't talk about those things. It was just a lie. And he got called out to be a liar, which is another reason, because that judge then said, Ms. Womack, you'll have the right to appeal should you lose. Now, based on my calling him a liar, putting for the record that he's a liar. It still didn't go well. Anything that can go wrong will, and it did.
Absolutely it did. And you went through nearly 5 years, and they had 2 weeks before that time frame was about to run out and they couldn't do anything. And 2 weeks to go out of 5 years of your life, they then decide to do it. I think the unfortunate thing is, from their point of view, I think they needed to save face because publicly they'd made such a big spectacle of it, but then couldn't back it up. And hence, I'm going to say it again, you were not charged with tax fraud. You were charged and convicted and pled to impeding the government.
Right.
So let's be clear about that. So going back to just a second here, we're talking about whatever can and will go wrong. We're also talking about, did you find that you had limited access to lines of credit now once you were out, or because you had a good relationship at this point with your bank and you sat down and had that lunch that was okay? Or did that prove to be an issue with other investments?
Well, that line of credit helped me do any other investments. And I had been fortunate that other than the loan against my home, I didn't have any other debt. So everybody was able to focus on what that one item was. But I think the bigger things that you don't think about is you just think you're going to be done with attorneys, and you're not. And so that's one of the things that you can't anticipate. It's still complicated for you to give your information to bankers and get them to understand your tax returns because they're still complicated. While I've got this whole tax thing hanging out there, whether I have the tax thing hanging out there or not, I have high losses carried forward from their old rules. So eventually they'll use those up and they're going to be gone. And I'm going to pay taxes on whatever comes in. But right now they're basically considered losses carried forward to apply against any earnings that I have. And that's exactly the incentive they gave businesses to get into. Like I was in a biodiesel energy plant. You were involved in it with me here in the States. So I'm in a biodiesel energy plant and, doing it and tax credits were happening and just building it and constructing it and everything. When it didn't succeed at the time because of the timing of tax credits being put on abatement, then suddenly it was a loss for us. And we ended up having to shut the thing down, file bankruptcy, and it became a big loss. It was a $2 million loss for me. Well, that's a loss that I with every intention intended to make a lot of money on. And now I've got a loss that I get to apply against any income that may come dribbling in while all this other stuff is going on, which is not that much income coming in now because I don't have my big old business. I'm not able to go out and start a whole bunch of other businesses because I'm spending all my time fighting all the legal parts.
Which is, that's the thing that's quite debilitating as well, because you think you've done your time, you've paid your penance and you're moving on, but the
I'm not
government.
even in there yet, but you're right. Even now, I'm not even in there when this is initially going on. But you're right. Even now, I can give somebody my tax returns, and most bankers won't understand it. It's too bad that I really had to try to learn more about it than the average banker or accountant, so I could sit down and help them go look for it. Even if I talk to most here's what the IRS agent told me, which I think sums everything up perfectly. When I said, "Are you looking at my losses carried forward?" They're called NOLs. At the end of the day, he said, "I don't know what an NOL is, and I don't care." Well, that's a person just telling you, I don't care what your paper says. I'm going to accuse you what I'm accusing you of.
Very concerning when you think you're trying to move forward, but yet in effect, you've paid your debt to society, but the government is actually not allowing you to move forward because the IRS is still the stumbling block and not going back and agreeing to what was negotiated and agreed to. Now that this is no longer on your head, I would have thought that settlement would be a fait accompli and you could move on. Let's hope that that does actually happen.
Yeah, let's hope. But some other things I think that you need to think about is I tried to make a small list of the kinds of things I think that immediately happen to you when you go in prison. What can go wrong is you might have the wrong attorney. I had 3 or 4 of them that were wrong, including all of them. I don't think I had a good attorney through the entire process. The months shown on your paperwork can be wrong. As we went through and said, I got 72 months instead of 18 months because the government does everything in months. And so you definitely have to check for that kind of paperwork can go wrong. Arriving on a Thursday, especially if it's a holiday weekend, is something that can go wrong because you've missed all your commissary and it's a long weekend for the holiday. So you're really going to be more detrimental to you. I wrote down that maintaining credit cards and bank accounts are a long lasting problem because even though I have those things, I'm unusual in that I was able to figure out how to do some businesses, grow some income, get some debt paid down, and survive in the business. And I had some investments that I had invested in 20 years ago that sold out and paid off that helped me substantially.
The other thing that I want to talk about a little bit is about stigma and judgment. So did you encounter that from family and or friends when you ended up going to jail?
Again, in the business world, so what happened a lot, and it could have been me as much as them, I always found myself sitting down over explaining. My husband and I both did over explaining. I have not nor did they think I was a tax cheat. I remember once at a class, not a class reunion thing, but when I had classmates there, she comes up and she goes, "Good for you for not paying your taxes." And I'm like, "Oh no, that is not what's happening here." So I sat her down and walked her through some of it. And I said, "This is worse than that. It'd be different if I didn't pay taxes. This is worse than that." And so we found ourselves explaining the situation a lot to people. I had really good friends and they knew it was true. They didn't know how as a company owner I could give away 100% of my profits 1 year to my employees so that they could grow and learn how to run a business and me take the profits in the future and I'd be a tax cheat at the same time. They just didn't understand it. Just right and left didn't happen the same way. I'm just not that kind of person. And if you knew me, you understood that about me, but there was no way for me to get that information out because I had one side that was going to tell the whole story. And then I had, an attorney picking the wrong attorneys. I had an attorney who was friends with the prosecuting attorney's office. And I don't know if from the very beginning, she didn't intend to just throw me over to the bus after she took $5 million from me. So it sucked. So I have access to money and everything, but I'm not telling you, well, let's say, for example, if I want to sit on a board of directors in a publicly traded company, I cannot. I'm a felon. And I was on a board of directors for a pretty large company, and the board all voted to let me stay on it. But it's not normal. And then that's the company that sold. So there are things that you are definitely limited on that you cannot do anymore. A few other investments I got into, we had to go through and clear it and get it approved before I could just put money into it to invest in it, hoping it paid off because I was a felon.
So it does impact every aspect of your life. And what about, did it strain the family dynamic, the situation?
It probably strained it more for me than it did anybody else because I'm not very good at sharing if I have problems. I'm not very good at telling you, "Oh my gosh, money's tight. Oh my gosh, don't anybody spend anything." I'm not very good at that. And so, I think probably it made it more for me to be testy in behavior, a little more just stressed, overall stressed and concerned about, especially till I got the debt paid down. And I mean, I spent some time on the banks saying this money's going to pay, and I'm working on this other deal, and I need you to leave the money in place once with my bank. And they said, and I've actually since then built up a second banking relationship. I'm relieved to tell you. So I've got two bank relationships, and I think if you're in business, you should have at least two.
Cheryl, for some people, I know that when you face this sort of conviction, I know that you had a friend in prison that lost custody and her rights to her child while she was in prison. So these are ramifications for a lot of different people in different ways. For you, you were fortunate your children were adults.
Yes.
But let's talk a little bit about that, because that's got to be soul destroying and to be in a situation like that.
I cannot tell you, woman after woman came to me with documents and papers for me to look at while I was in there, because when they were being taken away for drug use or for whatever close to drug use it was, and they had another name around it, then if they were coming in, I want to say for 2 or 3 years, they just leaned on them to give up all custodial rights to whomever was going to take their kids. So now you've got, and I mean, I get the other person's financially caring for them, but I think no matter what, I wouldn't give up any more than co-parenting, and I would have stayed on co-parenting, because now they have no rights. And then you're coming out of prison and you don't have rights to your own children. And if you get out in 5 years and your kids were 4 and 5, they're just 10 and you don't have rights to them. So if they turn 18, that's okay. They can make these decisions themselves. And you may want them to come visit you, and it could be your sister who's taking care of them who doesn't think it's good for them, and you have no rights. And so I think that's a bad decision, because if that you don't see them and you don't stay in touch with them, you're building no bond whatsoever, so that you've got anything to start with, and keep your base for when you do get out. And so again, I think that was another really hard part of it. I think another thing that you need to be able, that if it can go wrong, is so many women coming in there thinking they've got their husband's support, they've got their boyfriend's support. He's always going to put money on the books. It's going to be okay. And like I told you, we had the one gal who came in there and she had a fairly new boyfriend, and he put money on her books for about 90 days. And then he cut her off and broke up with her, and he was gone. And she blew everything as it came on, thinking this was going to be good times forever. And she had no money, none. It really became a really hard situation for her. So I am unique and unusual that my marriage survived it as well as it did, that my kids have survived it, that I survived it as well as I did. It's not through a lot of hard work, pain, and effort to put things back together. And I'm still putting things back together. But for most people, it wouldn't be possible. And that's all I can think about. I don't think about, I'm lucky that I'm able to get these things done, but it breaks my heart for people who, they're downtrodden and they're there, and what can go wrong? Well, now you can't come out and rent an apartment you want in because you're a felon. Now you can't get an auto loan, or you have to get exorbitant rates because you're a felon. All those different things are going to weigh against you.
Do you think in a way that it was almost easier that you and your family survived this process because you were the primary provider?
I absolutely believe being the primary provider and really always taking care of the family financial issues and bigger ticket item issues, or just life choice issues. I've always been the one who sort of oversaw all of that, and they've always leaned on me to do it. And I put enough in place to be gone for the time that I was gone, that for the most part, I'm not going to tell you, my son, when he had to go to the banks and basically say, look, I'll do anything you want. I will bank with you forever. We will always be. I mean, he would beg these banks to just give us a chance. And then he'd feel like a loser when he came out, because he couldn't get them to make a deal because they didn't know him from Adam and they didn't know me. And who wants to make your son feel that way and carry that kind of responsibility because the stupid ass bank I was with decided, after keeping millions of dollars of mine for years, they just weren't going to keep me as an account.
And that's a part of that whole stigma process, because that did impact upon the kids as well. And as you sort of indicated in the past, you had set up systems and processes in place with certain people. And so you can be let down, not just by family, but by friends. And do you think that that was primarily because the attitude changed towards you because you were a convicted felon?
Well, certainly in the business relationships, absolutely. Banking relationships, insurance, just immediately. Nobody wants to go look at it and say, well, did she really do anything wrong, or what did she do wrong? Is this really a moral? I mean, insurance is based on moral turpitude. Are you a good person? No, they didn't call me up and talk to me about it and say what really happened here. They just gave me higher insurance rates. So, again, what can go wrong will go wrong. Remember, when you come out, I was on Social Security. And if that's what you live on, which wasn't what I was living on, it stops. It stops the minute you go to jail. And if you don't tell them and they pay any during the time you're in jail, they look it up. And then when your benefits start back up, they start deducting that money before they pay you again. And then the other part is that you've got to pay for your health insurance the entire time that they're not giving you health insurance, or you'll lose a percentage of benefits, like 1% a year. every year until you can come back out and get started on it. And then when you come back out, you have to wait 30 days from the first day of the month for their coverage to start back up when it does come back up. And so I had like 45 days as a 68, 69-year-old woman. I had no insurance. It horrified me. I'm a healthy person, but what if I fell down and hurt myself or was in a car accident? I was horrified. And that's a terrible thing Social Security does to people. I mean, it's a terrible thing they do. I mean, and she goes, well, it's a good thing you paid your insurance every month so you won't lose benefits. And I'm like, really? That makes me feel better, but I still don't have any right now, do I?
So do you think there's, for the vast majority of felons that are coming out, that there's difficulty reinventing themselves, that they have to maybe change career paths, industries, or even cities because of the stigma associated with this?
Well, I think a lot of people aren't sure. For example, I knew a few white collar people who had embezzled money and done some things like that. And I think they come out enough broken that they're not sure they can ever get into that kind of a position again. And they're not looking for that kind of a job. I think they're going to be more ashamed to go ask for that. And, I can remember even talking to my banker and saying, I have a friend that when she gets out, I think would really be good at accounting and stuff. She goes, oh, I don't know that we could ever consider her. And I'm like, I was just really glad I didn't have to go get a job with somebody.
Tell me, what would be your ultimate for you? Would the ultimate be that this conviction was expunged or and you were pardoned as such? What would be the ultimate for this whole process to end for you?
Well, two things I think should happen. Number one, because this IRS thing has gone on for 20 years, I think that should be thrown out and canceled. By now, I feel like they should owe me money from all the money I've spent trying to fight it. They'll never see it that way. And number two, I would love to get a pardon. I would love to get a pardon when somebody really saw the depth of basically how I was set up by a girl who embezzled from me. And everybody else thought, oh my gosh, we've got a big one here. We're going to go after her. And just, came after me full thrust. I'm going to put the blame on me as much as anybody else that I didn't know how to defend me criminally. If this was civil, I'd have been fighting and screaming and carrying on, but I was scared to death. I didn't want to go to jail. So instead of fighting it, a lot of things the way you would have and been as feisty as you would have, I think I cowered more and probably settled for more because I was just too nervous.
Thank you for listening to How to Go to Camp with Katrina McLarin and Cheryl Womack. For more support, check out the Women of Worth website, www.womenofworthwow.org, where you'll find helpful resources, including Cheryl's books, Mummy Loves You Everywhere and How to Go to Camp, Surviving in a Women's Federal Prison. Whether you're preparing for the journey or supporting someone through it, remember, there's guidance, hope and a community ready to help you navigate this path.